What if the person you trusted most was hiding a devastating secret? In this gripping love story, a billionaire's reckless bet leads him to marry a woman from a struggling. What begins as a cruel game quickly evolves into something neither of them expected. But when the truth about the bet is revealed, their fragile bond is shattered, leaving her questioning everything and him desperate to prove that his love is real. Can love overcome betrayal, or are some wounds too deep to heal? Dive into this emotional journey of heartbreak, redemption, and the fight to rebuild trust against all odds. The city skyline shimmered under the glow of 1,000 lights, a testament to the wealth and ambition that defined its towering structures. At the heart of it all was Corbin Drake, a 32-year-old tech entrepreneur whose name was synonymous with innovation and success. From the outside, Corbin had it all: a billion-dollar company, a penthouse overlooking the city, and a lifestyle most could only dream of. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, he was a man who had grown numb to the very life he had built. Corbin leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a glass of whiskey as the sound of laughter echoed around him. The rooftop party was in full swing, filled with the city's elite investors, influencers, and socialites who thrived on excess. But Corbin wasn't paying attention. His sharp blue eyes scanned the crowd with a detached boredom, his mind elsewhere. He had long since stopped finding joy in the parties, the accolades, or even the women who threw themselves at him. Life had become a series of predictable moves, a game he had already mastered. "Corbin, you're zoning out again," a voice interrupted, pulling him back to the present. It was Ethan, his oldest friend and business partner, grinning as he handed Corbin another drink. "You've got everything a man could want, and yet you look like you'd rather be anywhere else." Corbin smirked, raising his glass. "Maybe I've just outgrown the game." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Outgrown it? You're the one who invented it. But seriously, when are you going to settle down? Or are you too scared to tie yourself to one person?" The question hung in the air, drawing the attention of their small circle of friends. Corbin chuckled, leaning back with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Settle down? Marriage is just another transaction. With enough money, you can get anyone to say I do. Love is for people who can't afford better options." The group erupted in laughter, but one voice cut through the noise. Leo, the wildest of the bunch, leaned forward with a mischievous glint in his eye. "If you're so sure money can buy anything, how about this? You marry the next woman you meet who's down on her luck. No models, no socialites, just someone completely out of your world." The table fell silent, the absurdity of the challenge hanging in the air. Corbin raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Marry a stranger? Sounds like a waste of time." "Or are you scared?" Leo taunted, his tone dripping with mockery. "Come on, Corbin, prove it. Show us that your money really can buy anything." Corbin's grin didn't falter. If anything, the challenge ignited a spark of arrogance in him. He thrived on proving people wrong, on winning games others thought impossible. "Fine," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do it. 1 year of marriage, no strings attached, and when I win, you'll all owe me." The group burst into laughter again, thinking it was all a joke, but as Corbin downed the last of his drink and stood, there was a seriousness in his gaze that silenced them. "Watch me," he said simply, tossing a few $100 bills on the table before striding out of the party. As he stepped into the cool night air, Corbin's mind was already racing. He didn't know who he would meet or how this ridiculous bet would play out, but one thing was certain: he never lost. What he didn't realize, however, was that this time, the stakes were far higher than he could have imagined. The city streets were a stark contrast to the glittering rooftop Corbin had just left. The air was colder here, the lights dimmer, and the hum of life quieter. Corbin walked with his hands in his pockets, his tailored suit and polished shoes out of place among the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. He wasn't entirely sure what he was looking for, but the thrill of the challenge kept him moving. The bet had been ridiculous, even by his standards. Marry a stranger? Someone completely outside his world? It sounded absurd, but Corbin wasn't one to back down. He thrived on proving people wrong, on taking risks that others wouldn't dare. And besides, it wasn't like he had anything to lose. A year of his life was nothing compared to the satisfaction of winning. As he turned a corner, his eyes landed on a small park tucked between two aging apartment buildings. The benches were mostly empty, save for a few figures huddled under blankets. Corbin's gaze swept over them, his mind calculating. He wasn't looking for pity or charity. This was a game, and he intended to play it well. That's when he saw her. She was sitting on the edge of a bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself to ward off the chill. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her face, and her clothes, though clean, were worn and faded. There was a quiet dignity about her, a kind of defiance in the way she held her head high despite her surroundings. Corbin paused, intrigued. He approached slowly, his footsteps crunching against the gravel. She didn't look up until he was only a few feet away, her sharp green eyes meeting his with a mixture of suspicion and annoyance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the obvious wariness in her tone. Corrigan smirked, slipping his hands deeper into his pockets. "Maybe. What's your name?" She hesitated, her gaze narrowing. "Why do you care?" "Let's just say I'm looking for someone," he replied, his tone casual. "Someone who might be interested in a unique opportunity." She scoffed, shaking her head. "If you're here to offer me some kind of handout, save it. I don't need your charity." Corbin's smirk widened. Her defiance only made her more interesting. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a business proposition." That caught her attention. She tilted her head, studying him carefully. "What kind of proposition?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. 1 year. You marry me for 1 year, and at the end of it, I'll give you $500,000. No strings attached. For a moment, she just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed in the empty park. "You're insane," she said, standing up and brushing past him. "Find someone else for your ridiculous game." Corbin turned, following her with his gaze as she walked away. "What if I told you it wasn't a game?" he called after her. "What if I told you this could change your life?" She stopped but didn't turn around. "My life doesn't need changing," she said, her voice cold. "At least not by someone like you." Corbin frowned, watching as she disappeared into the shadows. He hadn't expected her to say yes right away, but he also hadn't expected her to walk away so easily. Most people would have jumped at the chance $500,000 was life-changing for anyone, but she was different. She wasn't desperate, at least not in the way he'd assumed. For the first time in a long time, Corbin felt a flicker of uncertainty. He wasn't used to being turned down, and the challenge only made him more determined. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she was so fiercely independent, but he knew one thing: he wasn't giving up. As he walked back to his car, his mind was already working on a plan. He would find her again, and this time, he wouldn't take no for an answer. The bet wasn't just about proving his friends wrong anymore. It was about proving something to himself. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he felt like she was the key to it all. The next evening, Corbin found himself back at the park. He wasn't entirely sure why he had returned. Maybe it was the challenge, or maybe it was the way she had looked at him, like she could see right through his polished exterior. Either way, he wasn't leaving without an answer this time. He spotted her almost immediately. She was sitting on the same bench, her posture tense as she flipped through a worn notebook. Her dark hair fell over her face, but Corbin could see the faint furrow in her brow, the way her pen hovered over the page, as if she couldn't quite find the right words. She looked lost in thought, and for a moment he hesitated. But then he reminded himself of the bet, of the stakes, and he pushed forward. "You back again, I see," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. She looked up sharply, her green eyes narrowing as she recognized him. "You again? What do you want this time?" Corbin smirked, slipping his hands into his pockets. I told you yesterday, I have a proposition for you. She sighed, closing her notebook with a snap. And I told you I'm not interested. Maybe you should hear me out, he said, taking a seat on the bench beside her. She shifted away slightly, her body language screaming distrust, but she didn't get up. That was a start. Look, he began, his tone softening. I know how this sounds. A stranger walks up to you and offers you money to marry him. It's insane, but I'm serious. This isn't some kind of scam or joke. It's a business deal. 1 year of marriage, and at the end of it, you walk away with $500,000. No strings attached. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Why me? She asked finally. Out of all the people in this city, why would you pick someone like me? Corbin hesitated. He couldn't exactly tell her the truth, that she was part of a bet, a game to prove a point. But he also couldn't lie outright. So he settled for something in between. Because you're different, he said simply. You're not like the people I usually deal with. You're honest, straightforward. You don't pretend to be something you're not. She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. And you think that's a good enough reason to marry someone? It's a start, he replied, his smirk returning. Besides, it's not like I'm asking for forever, just 1 year. You get the money, I get, well, let's just say I get what I need too. She shook her head, standing up and slinging her bag over her shoulder. You're unbelievable, she muttered. Do you even hear yourself? You're treating this like it's some kind of business transaction. Marriage isn't supposed to be like that. Corbin stood as well, blocking her path. And what is marriage supposed to be then? Love? Commitment? Let me tell you something, those things don't last. People lie, they cheat, they leave. At least this way, we both know what we're getting into. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, Corbin thought she might slap him. But instead, she just stared at him, her green eyes blazing with something he couldn't quite place. You must be a very lonely man, she said quietly, her voice cutting through him like a knife. The words hit harder than he expected, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he stepped aside, letting her pass. Think about it, he called after her. $500,000. That's enough to change your life. She didn't respond, disappearing into the shadows once again. Corbin stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. He wasn't used to being rejected, and the sting of her words lingered. But he wasn't giving up. Not yet. The next day, Corbin did something he hadn't done in years. He tracked someone down. It wasn't hard. He had the resources, the connections. Within hours, he had her name, Elise Grant, 28 years old, former dancer. Her father had been a renowned choreographer, but after his death, her life had spiraled. Injuries had ended her career, and she had been struggling ever since. Armed with this knowledge, Corbin felt a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't just chasing a bet anymore. There was something about Elise that intrigued him, something that made him want to know more. And if he had to convince her one step at a time, so be it. Elise sat in the corner of a small cafe, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The warmth seeped into her fingers, but it did little to ease the tension in her chest. She had spent the entire night replaying the stranger's words in her mind. $500,000? It was an absurd offer, one that sounded too good to be true. And yet there was something about him, his confidence, his persistence, that made her believe he wasn't lying. She sighed, staring out the window at the bustling street. The truth was, she needed the money, desperately. Her savings were almost gone, and the part-time jobs she managed to scrape together barely covered rent. The dream of dancing again felt like a distant memory, but with that kind of money, she could afford the physical therapy she needed. She could rebuild her life. But at what cost? Marrying a man she barely knew? A man who clearly didn't believe in love or commitment? It felt wrong, like she was selling a piece of herself. And yet, the alternative, continuing to struggle, to scrape by, felt even worse. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the chair across from her scraping against the floor. She looked up, startled, to see him, Corbin Drake, sitting down as if he belonged there. He was dressed impeccably, his tailored coat and sharp features drawing a few curious glances from the other patrons. Elise frowned, her grip tightening on her cup. "How did you find me?" she asked, her tone sharp. Corbin smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I have my ways." "That's not an answer." He shrugged, unbothered by her irritation. "Let's just say I'm very good at getting what I want." Elise rolled her eyes, but before she could respond, Corbin leaned forward, his expression softening. "Look, I know this sounds crazy, and I know you don't trust me, but I'm serious about this. 1 year, that's all I'm asking. You'll have your independence, your freedom. I won't ask for anything more than what's necessary to make it look real." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice quieter this time. Corbin hesitated, his smirk fading. "Because you're not like anyone I've ever met," he admitted. "You're honest, you don't care about my money or my name, and I think you could use this as much as I can." Elise's chest tightened at his words. He wasn't wrong, she did need this. But that didn't make it any easier to say yes. "What's in it for you?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Why would someone like you need to marry a stranger?" Corbin's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might not answer. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Let's just say I have something to prove. To myself, to the people around me. And this is the easiest way to do it." Elise frowned, but before she could press further, Corbin reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He slid it across the table toward her. "Here's a contract. It outlines everything, terms, conditions, the payment. Take it, read it, think about it. If you decide to say no, I'll leave you alone. But if you say yes, well, I think we could both get what we want." She stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment where she had to make a choice. She could walk away, keep her pride intact and continue struggling, or she could take the risk, step into the unknown, and hope it didn't destroy her. After a long moment, she reached out and took the envelope. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Corbin nodded, standing up and adjusting his coat. "That's all I'm asking." As he walked away, Elise felt a strange mix of relief and dread settle over her. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but one thing was certain: her life was about to change forever. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the sprawling penthouse that would now be Elise's home. She stepped inside hesitantly, her worn sneakers making no sound against the polished marble floors. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the skyline glittering like a sea of stars. Everything about the place screamed wealth. The sleek, modern furniture, the abstract art adorning the walls, and the faint scent of something expensive lingering in the air. Corbin stood a few steps ahead, his hands in his pockets as he watched her take it all in. "Welcome home," he said, his tone casual, as if this was just another business deal. Elise turned to him, her expression unreadable. "This isn't a home," she said quietly. "It's a museum." Corbin smirked, unbothered by her comment. "You'll get used to it." She doubted that. The penthouse felt cold, impersonal, like a place designed to impress rather than to live in. But she didn't say that out loud. Instead, she followed him as he led her through the space, pointing out the essentials: the kitchen, the living room, the guest bedroom that had been converted into her personal space. "This is your room," he said, opening the door to reveal a smaller but equally luxurious space. The bed was massive, covered in crisp white linens, and the closet was already stocked with clothes in her size. Elise frowned, running her fingers over the fabric of a dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You didn't have to do this," she said, turning to him. Corbin shrugged. It's part of the arrangement. If we're going to make this look real, you need to look the part. Elise bit back a retort, reminding herself why she was here. $500,000. That was the goal. She could endure this for a year. She had to. The first few days were awkward, to say the least. Corbin treated her like a guest rather than a wife, which was fine by Elise. She wasn't here for romance or companionship. But the distance between them only made the situation feel more surreal. They barely spoke unless necessary, and when they did, the conversations were short and transactional. The staff didn't help matters. Elise could feel their eyes on her whenever she walked into a room, their polite smiles masking their curiosity. She knew what they were thinking. What is she doing here? How did someone like her end up with someone like him? The worst part was the events. Corbin insisted on taking her to a high-profile charity gala just a week after she moved in. Elise had protested, but he had been firm. "People need to see us together," he had said. "It's part of the deal." The night of the gala, Elise stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The dress Corbin had chosen for her was stunning, a deep emerald green that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair had been styled by a professional, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like someone else entirely, someone who belonged in Corbin's world. But as she stepped into the ballroom, she realized how wrong that assumption was. The room was filled with the city's elite, all dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. Elise felt their eyes on her as she walked in on Corbin's arm, their whispers barely concealed. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the man beside her. Corbin, as always, looked completely at ease, his charm on full display as he greeted guests and exchanged pleasantries. But Elise wasn't like him. She didn't know how to navigate this world, and it showed. She stumbled over her words when someone asked her about her background, and she could feel the judgment in their eyes when she admitted she wasn't working. By the end of the night, she was exhausted, her confidence shattered. Back at the penthouse, Elise kicked off her heels and sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "I don't belong here," she muttered, more to herself than to Corbin. He stood across the room, loosening his tie as he watched her. For a moment he said nothing, and she thought he might agree with her. But then he surprised her. "You handled yourself fine," he said, his tone softer than usual. "Better than most people would in your position." Elise looked up, startled. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Corbin smirked, but there was no malice in it. "Take it however you want." She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "You're impossible. And you're stubborn," he shot back, his smirk widening. Maybe that's why this might actually work. For the first time since she had agreed to this arrangement, Elise felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. The days turned into weeks, and Elise began to settle into her new life at the penthouse. It wasn't easy. She still felt out of place in Corbin's world of luxury and excess, but she was learning to navigate it. The staff, though polite, kept their distance, and Corbin remained as enigmatic as ever. He was polite, even charming at times, but there was always a wall between them, an unspoken agreement to keep things strictly business. But that wall began to crack in the most unexpected ways. It started one evening when Elise came down with a fever. She had been pushing herself too hard, trying to keep up with the demands of her new life, and her body finally gave out. She tried to brush it off, insisting she just needed rest. But Corbin wasn't having it. "You look like you're about to collapse," he said, his brow furrowed as he stood in the doorway of her room. "You need to see a doctor?" "I'm fine," Elise muttered, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "It's just a cold." Corbin didn't argue. Instead, he disappeared for a few minutes and returned with a tray of soup, tea, and medicine. Elise blinked in surprise as he set it down on the nightstand. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice softer now. "I know," he replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But I did anyway." For the first time, Elise saw a different side of him. Gone was the confident, almost arrogant businessman she had come to know. In his place was someone human, someone who cared even if he didn't want to admit it. "Thank you," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. Corbin shrugged, but there was a flicker of something in his expression, something vulnerable. "Don't mention it." That night marked a shift between them. Corbin began to open up little by little, and Elise found herself doing the same. They started having conversations that went beyond the surface, sharing pieces of their pasts that they had kept hidden from the world. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Elise told him about her father. She spoke of how he had been her biggest supporter, how he had pushed her to pursue her dream of becoming a dancer. But when he passed away, everything fell apart. She had injured herself during a performance not long after, and without him, she didn't have the strength to keep going. "I lost everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My career, my confidence, my purpose. I've been trying to find my way back ever since." Corbin listened intently, his usual smirk replaced by a look of quiet understanding. "I know what it's like to lose someone," he said after a moment. "My parents died when I was a teenager. That's why I started my company. I thought if I could build something big enough, successful enough, it would fill the void, but it didn't." Elise looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "I didn't know." "Most people don't," he said with a shrug. "It's easier to let them think I'm just some arrogant billionaire who only cares about himself." "Isn't that who you are?" she teased, a small smile tugging at her lips. Corbin chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe, but not entirely." As the weeks went on, their connection deepened. They began spending more time together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Corbin started joining Elise for breakfast in the mornings, and she found herself looking forward to their late-night talks on the balcony. There was a warmth between them now, a sense of comfort that neither of them had expected. But with that warmth came something else, something neither of them was ready to admit. It was in the way Corbin's gaze lingered on Elise a little too long, in the way her heart raced whenever he smiled at her. It was in the small, unspoken moments that passed between them, moments that felt like they belonged to something more than just an arrangement. One night, as they stood on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below, Corbin turned to her. "You know," he said, his voice low, "you're not what I expected." Elise raised an eyebrow, a playful smile on her lips. "What did you expect?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But not this. Not someone who makes me rethink everything." Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. But before either of them could say anything more, Corbin stepped back, his expression guarded once again. "Good night, Elise," he said, his voice distant now. "Good night," she replied, watching as he disappeared inside. As she stood there alone, Elise couldn't help but wonder what was happening between them. This wasn't part of the deal. This wasn't supposed to feel real. But it did, and that terrified her. The morning started like any other. Elise sat at the kitchen counter, sipping her coffee as the sunlight poured through the massive windows. Corbin was on a call in the next room, his voice calm and commanding as he discussed some business deal. It had become a routine of sorts, her quiet mornings, his endless work. But there was a strange comfort in it, a rhythm that felt almost normal. That illusion shattered when her phone buzzed. Elise glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing as she saw an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before opening the message, her heart sinking as she read the words. "You should know the truth about your husband. Check the link." Her stomach twisted as she clicked the link, her coffee forgotten. The article that loaded was from a gossip site, the kind that thrived on scandal and drama. But it wasn't the source that mattered, it was the content. Her eyes scanned the headline, her breath catching in her throat. Tech mogul Corbin Drake's shocking bet, marrying a nobody for a dare. The words blurred as she read the article, each sentence hitting her like a punch to the gut. It detailed everything the bet Corbin had made with his friends, the terms of their arrangement, even the amount of money he had promised her. It painted her as a pawn in his game, a desperate woman who had sold herself for a chance at a better life. Elise's hands trembled as she set the phone down. Her mind raced, replaying every moment they had shared, every conversation, every look. Had it all been a lie? Had he been playing her this entire time? She didn't realize Corbin had entered the room until he spoke. "Elise, are you okay?" She looked up, her green eyes blazing with anger and hurt. "Did you do this?" she demanded, holding up her phone. Corbin frowned, stepping closer. "What are you talking about?" "This," she snapped, shoving the phone into his hands. "The article. The bet. Is it true?" His face paled as he read the headline, his jaw tightening. "Elise, I can explain." "Don't," she interrupted, her voice shaking. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. Just tell me the truth. Did you marry me because of a bet?" Corbin hesitated, and in that moment she had her answer. The silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. Elise let out a bitter laugh, tears stinging her eyes. "I can't believe I was stupid enough to trust you, to think that maybe, just maybe, you were different." "It wasn't like that," Corbin said, his voice desperate now. "Yes, it started as a bet, but it's not what you think. Things changed. I changed." "Changed?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You lied to me, Corbin. You used me. How is that supposed to make me feel?" "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," he said, stepping closer. "I didn't expect to feel anything for you, but I do. Elise, I don't," she said, cutting him off. "Don't you dare say you care about me, because if you did, you would have told me the truth." Corbin's shoulders slumped, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked a lot like regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you." Elise shook her head, backing away. "You don't get to apologize, not for this." She turned and walked toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Corbin called after her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The walls of the penthouse felt like they were closing in, suffocating her. She needed to get out, to breathe, to think. Elise didn't know how long she walked, her feet carrying her aimlessly through the city. The streets blurred around her, her mind replaying everything she had learned. She thought about the way Corbin had looked at her, the way he had cared for her when she was sick, the way he had opened up to her about his past. Was any of it real, or had it all been part of the game? By the time she stopped, the sun was setting, casting the city in shades of gold and orange. She found herself in front of a small park, the same one where she had first met Corbin. The memory made her chest ache, and she sank onto a bench, burying her face in her hands. She had trusted him. She had let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was different. But now she realized the truth. Corbin Drake was exactly who she had thought he was when they first met. A man who thought money could buy anything, even her. Back at the penthouse, Corbin sat alone in the dark, the article still open on his phone. He had always prided himself on being in control, on never letting emotions get in the way of his decisions. But now, for the first time in years, he felt completely lost. He had made a mistake, a huge one, and now he didn't know if he could fix it. The days following the revelation were some of the longest of Elise's life. She had left the penthouse that night and checked into a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just a bed, a chair, and a flickering TV, but it was quiet, and more importantly, it was far away from Corbin. She needed space to think, to process everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from Corbin. At first, she ignored them, unable to face him or his excuses. But as the days passed, her anger began to give way to something else. Confusion, sadness, and a nagging question she couldn't shake. Had any of it been real? She thought about the moments they had shared, the way he had cared for her when she was sick, the late-night conversations on the balcony, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. Those moments had felt real. But how could they be, when the foundation of their relationship was built on a lie? Elise sighed, staring out the window at the gray sky. She had spent so long trying to rebuild her life, to find her footing again after losing everything. And just when she thought she had found someone worth holding on to, it had all come crashing down. Meanwhile, Corbin was unraveling in his own way. The penthouse felt empty without Elise, the silence a constant reminder of her absence. He had always thought of himself as someone who didn't need anyone, someone who could handle anything on his own. But now he realized how wrong he had been. He missed her. Not just her presence, but her. The way she challenged him, the way she saw through his facade, the way she made him feel like he could be more than the man he had become. And for the first time in years, Corbin felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Regret. He had made a mistake, a huge one, and he knew it. But the question was, could he fix it? Could he prove to Elise that what they had was real, that he wasn't the man she thought he was? Corbin spent hours pacing the penthouse, replaying their last conversation in his mind. He had been so focused on winning the bet, on proving a point to his friends, that he hadn't stopped to think about the consequences. And now he was paying the price. Finally, he made a decision. He couldn't let things end like this. He had to find a way to make things right, to show Elise that she meant more to him than any bet ever could. Elise was sitting on the edge of the motel bed, scrolling aimlessly through her phone, when a knock at the door startled her. She frowned, setting the phone down and crossing the room. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Corbin stood there, his usually polished appearance slightly disheveled. His tie was loose, his hair messy, and there was a look in his eyes she had never seen before. Something raw, almost desperate. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. "I needed to see you," he said, his voice low. "Please, Elise, just hear me out." She hesitated, her hand tightening on the door frame. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face, to tell him to leave and never come back. But another part of her, the part that still cared, despite everything, wanted to know what he had to say. "Fine," she said finally, stepping aside. "You have 5 minutes." Corbin stepped inside, his gaze flickering around the small room before settling on her. "I know I messed up," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I need you to know that what we have, is real. It started as a bet, yes, but it became so much more than that." Elise crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust you after everything?" "I don't expect you to trust me right away," he admitted. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back. I'll tell the world the truth if I have to. I'll walk away from my company, my friends, anything. Just tell me what I need to do." She stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, to believe that he was being honest. But the pain of his betrayal was still fresh, and she wasn't sure if she could let it go. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Elise said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't just lie to me. You made me feel like I was nothing, like I was just a game to you." Corbin's voice cracked as he replied, "You were never a game to me, Elise. Not after I got to know you. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I'll fight for you, for us, if you'll let me." Elise hesitated, her heart warring with her head. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she admitted, "but I'm willing to try." Elise felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he could change, that they could have something real. But could she take that risk? "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure out what I want." Corbin nodded, his expression filled with both relief and sadness. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait, for as long as it takes." As he turned to leave, Elise felt a flicker of hope stir in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them. But for now, all she could do was take it one step at a time. The days that followed were a blur of emotions for Elise. She stayed at the motel, trying to sort through the chaos in her mind. Part of her wanted to believe Corbin, to believe that he truly cared for her and that their connection had been real. But the other part of her, the part that had been hurt and betrayed, kept reminding her of the lies, the humiliation, and the pain. Corbin, true to his word, gave her space. He didn't call or text, but his presence was still felt. Every time she turned on the TV or scrolled through social media, there he was, making headlines, not for his business deals, but for his public apology. It started with a press conference. Elise had been flipping through channels when she saw him standing at a podium, his usual confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. The reporters bombarded him with questions, but he held up a hand, silencing them. "I'm here to set the record straight," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Yes, the rumors are true. I made a bet with my friends, and as part of that bet, I married Elise. It was wrong, and I take full responsibility for my actions. But what started as a mistake turned into something I never expected. I fell in love with her." Elise's breath caught in her throat as she watched him speak. He looked directly into the cameras, his expression earnest. "Elise is the most incredible person I've ever met. She's strong, kind, and resilient, and I don't deserve her. But I want the world to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make things right." The reporters erupted into questions, but Corbin didn't answer. He simply walked away, leaving the room in stunned silence. Elise wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her was touched by his gesture, by the fact that he was willing to risk his reputation to make things right, but another part of her was skeptical. Words were easy, actions were harder. A few days later, she received a package at the motel. Inside was a handwritten letter from Corbin, along with a small, worn notebook. She hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the letter. "Elise, I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm serious about making things right. This notebook belonged to my mother. She used to write down her thoughts, her dreams, and her regrets. After she passed, I started writing in it too. It's the only thing I've ever kept that truly matters to me, and I want you to have it. Maybe it will help you understand me better, or maybe it won't. Either way, it's yours. Corbin." Elise stared at the notebook, her heart heavy. She opened it slowly, flipping through the pages. The first entries were written in a delicate feminine script, his mother's words. They spoke of love, loss, and hope. But as the entries shifted to Corbin's handwriting, the tone changed. His words were raw, filled with pain and self-doubt. He wrote about losing his parents, about feeling like he had to prove himself to the world, about the emptiness that success couldn't fill. And then, near the end, she found an entry about her. "Elise is different. She doesn't care about my money or my status. She sees through all of it, and for the first time in years, I feel like someone actually sees me. I don't know how to tell her the truth about the bet. I'm terrified of losing her. But I know I have to. She deserves better than this." Tears blurred her vision as she closed the notebook. For the first time, she saw Corbin not as the arrogant billionaire who had made a bet, but as a man who was just as lost and broken as she was. A week later, Elise found herself standing outside the penthouse. She had spent days agonizing over her decision, but in the end she knew she needed closure, whether that meant walking away for good or giving him another chance. Corbin opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw her. "Elise?" he said, his voice soft. "I didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted, stepping inside. The penthouse felt different now, less intimidating, more familiar. but I needed to talk to you." He nodded, stepping aside to let her in. They sat on the couch, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "I read the notebook," she said finally, her voice steady. "I saw what you wrote about me." Corbin's jaw tightened, and he looked down at his hands. "I meant every word." "I believe you," she said, surprising even herself. "But believing you doesn't erase what happened. You hurt me, Corbin. You made me feel like I was just a game to you." "I know," he said, his voice filled with regret. "And I'll never forgive myself for that. But I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be better, that I can be the man you deserve." Elise studied him, her heart pounding. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said honestly, "but I'm willing to try." Corbin's eyes lit up and he reached for her hand. "That's all I need, just a chance." As their fingers intertwined, Elise felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding trust. Elise didn't move back into the penthouse right away. Instead, she and Corbin agreed to take things slowly, meeting in neutral places, parks, coffee shops, and quiet restaurants where they could talk without the weight of their past hanging over them. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the pain of his betrayal resurfaced, moments when she questioned whether she was making the right decision, but Corbin was patient, never pushing her, always letting her set the pace. For Corbin, it was a humbling experience. He had spent so much of his life in control, used to getting what he wanted with little effort. But this was different. Winning Elise back wasn't about grand gestures or flashy displays of wealth. It was about showing up, being honest, and proving to her that he was willing to change. And slowly, bit by bit, he began to earn her trust. One evening, as they walked through the park where they had first met, Corbin turned to her. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice hesitant, "about the bet, about everything I did to hurt you." Elise glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "What about it?" "I want to make it right," he said. "Not just with you, but with everyone. I've already cut ties with the friends who started this whole thing, and I've decided to donate the money I would have spent on the bet to a charity for the homeless. It's not enough to undo what I did, but it's a start." Elise stopped walking, her heart softening as she looked at him. "You don't have to do that, Corbin." "Yes, I do," he said firmly, "because it's the right thing to do, and because I want to be the kind of man you can be proud of." She smiled, a small, genuine smile that made his chest ache. "You're getting there." As the months passed, their relationship began to heal. Elise moved back into the penthouse, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just Corbin's space anymore, it was theirs. They redecorated together, filling the once cold rooms with warmth and personality. Elise even started dancing again, taking small steps toward reclaiming the dream she had once thought was lost. Corbin, for his part, made good on his promise to change. He stepped back from his company, delegating more responsibilities to his team so he could focus on the things that truly mattered. He spent more time with Elise, supporting her as she rebuilt her life and rediscovered her passion for dance. And in doing so, he found a sense of purpose he had never known before. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights, Corbin turned to Elise. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. She raised an eyebrow, a teasing smile on her lips. "What is it?" Corbin took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Elise," he began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous, "I know I've made mistakes more than I can count, but loving you wasn't one of them. You've changed me in ways I never thought possible, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you." He opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring that sparkled in the soft light. "Will you marry me? Not because of a bet or a deal or anything else, just because I love you." Tears filled Elise's eyes as she looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of love and disbelief. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, I'll marry you." Corbin's face broke into a smile, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. They kissed, the city lights twinkling around them like stars, and for the first time in a long time, Elise felt at peace. Their wedding was nothing like the first one. It wasn't a lavish affair filled with strangers and spectacle. Instead, it was a small, intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and family. Elise wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with flowers, and Corbin couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle. As they exchanged vows, there were no lies, no hidden agendas, just two people who had fought through their pain and found their way back to each other. When Corbin promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his life, Elise knew he meant every word. In the years that followed, their lives changed in ways they never could have imagined. Elise opened a dance studio, using her experiences to inspire others who had faced setbacks in their lives. Corbin became an advocate for social causes, using his wealth and influence to make a difference in the world. Together, they built a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. And though their story had started with a lie, it had grown into something real, something worth fighting for, because in the end, love wasn't about perfection. It was about forgiveness, growth, and the courage to take a chance on each other.